Moving is not fun for just about everybody. And the last thing that I want for you to have happen is that you're living on air mattresses or in sleeping bags, you're eating fast food every single night, and you're just miserable for months on end. We don't want that. And there's a way for you to go about this process and be very, very comfortable in your home. So if you found yourself in a position where you know you have to sell your home, you have to move, I'm here to make things a little bit easier for you with 5 tips that I've learned through the years of helping with sellers move that is gonna make that process a little bit easier for you, maybe avoid a little bit of the headache, and it's probably things you haven't heard before. So the first on my list, the first of the 5 things that is super important that you do if you are planning to move is starting early. And now before I lose you, listen, starting early, I don't mean 4 months early. Don't even mean 6 months early. I mean, seriously, start this process, start thinking about researching and figuring out what you need to do a year early. Now, if you're watching this video and you're like, well, crap, I'm not a year early, that's fine. You're at least on the right path of figuring that process out. But if you start super, super early, first, you're gonna be shocked at how quickly a year goes by the time you maybe depersonalize your home, make some updates, get everybody ready and on board and find where you're going. But then secondly, if you start that early, you're going to have a community of people who are helping you along the way, making that process not feel quite as aggressive and just go a little bit smoother. I found the number one thing that people get stuck on when they are moving and that makes it that much harder is if they have a deadline. I swear every single time a seller comes to me and says, hey, Larissa, I want to sell my house. I'm ready to go. I need to be where I need to be in 3 months. I have a mini panic attack, and it's not because we can't make that happen, but it's because 3 months is a very, very short period of time, and it can just feel chaotic for everybody. So if you are in that position where you're under 4 months, really anything under that timeline, even really between 4 and 6 months, get your team together now. Finish watching this video, do it on 2 times speed, and get that team together right now because really you need longer. The second kind of part of that is identifying the person that is going to be the hardest to move in the family. So this could be a disabled child, it could be an elderly parent, heck, it could even be pets that are challenging to move. I had a client with horses, and that is not necessarily something we can just pick up and move across town, although yes, we can. We have to have a place for them to go. They can't just live in a backyard. So identify that person or thing that's gonna be the hardest to move and work your plan, now that you have a year, work your plan around that because that is going to be your priority as you get yourself situated. If you find yourself here in a position where you can sleep on air mattresses and you don't have kids running around, that is gonna make the process so much easier for you. So you might not have that as a hurdle, but most of the time, you're going to have somebody or something that's challenging to move. Okay, my second part of this, and this one is probably a little bit more obvious, which is packing your fragile things and your holiday things away early. So get everything that is going to be fragile knickknacks or family photos or holiday decor that you don't need, get all of that packed early. Get it in the garage. I don't care if you stuff that garage full. Let's be real, everybody knows what a garage looks like. We don't care if you have boxes out there. So get it stuffed full. Make sure you allow access to the panel, water heater, furnace, if they're out there, so that people can access it when they're purchasing the home. But otherwise, get all that stuff that you don't use out of the house, get it put away. I would even go as far to get like baking dishes or your crock pot that you never use. Get that stuff out because it's gonna make your move timeline that much easier as you get closer. And if it's things you rarely use anyway, you don't need them in the house. I've actually found that people have gone through this process, had these boxes in the garage for 6 months, and then realized they don't actually need them. And so that's potentially a good way to minimalize as you're going as well. Okay, the third thing, I always hear sellers talking about, well, I need to paint my house and I need to do new carpet and all these things before I'm ready for you to come over, before I'm ready to list my house. And I would actually highly encourage you to have somebody taking a look at your house before you make any fixes. So my third item here is don't make any changes on your home. Don't paint a wall, don't fix anything. Don't do it until you know for a fact that that item is gonna give you a dollar for dollar return. I'll give you an example. I had a client recently who had an older roof and they were thinking they needed to replace the roof, which was gonna be about $25,000 before they went on the market. So I asked the question, I said, is it leaking? It's not leaking. Well, why do you feel like you need to replace it? Well, it's older. We know that it's got like 5 to 7 years left. But here's the thing. The buyer who purchased their home didn't care. In fact, we were in a position where we were a multiple offer situation, and that buyer was comfortable with an older roof. They were fully aware of its condition, and my seller never had to replace the roof. So what you think you might have to be doing, you might actually not need to, depending on the market you're in, where you're at, what the buyers are looking for. So I would just recommend that you don't touch anything until you have your realtor step in the door. The other thing I'll say on that is that different realtors view things differently. And so there might be one that comes in and says, yes, we need to redo everything. And there might be another one that comes in and says, no, you don't need to touch anything. On the exact same house, the difference there is often comes back to their marketing plan, and the way that they put a house on the market can also be how they're pricing your home. So have those conversations, have it with multiple. I'm going to get to that. But at the end of the day, my point here is don't make any changes until you know for a fact you have to, and it's going to actually get you more money for the home. So just don't touch anything. The second to last thing I have on my list here is that you need to figure out what your plan is between the time that you go on the market and when you physically move into wherever you're going next. What are you doing during that time? Depending on where you're at, that could be 1 month, it could be 5 months, just depends on your unique market. But what does that look like for you? Are you guys sleeping on air mattresses? Are you living in the house the way you always had? Are you completely moving out and living in an RV? All of this is going to be impacting your day-to-day life, how you function, what you can eat out of your kitchen. And the last thing that I want for you to have happen is that you're living on air mattresses or in sleeping bags, you're eating fast food every single night, and you're just miserable for months on end. We don't want that. And there's a way for you to go about this process and be very, very comfortable in your home, be minimalized maybe in the way that you currently live and the way that your house is kept so that we can have showings, but still go through the process and feel really, really comfortable with it. So there is strategy there, but having that conversation of what that plan looks like, especially if you are moving across town or out of the area, if you have a home sale contingency, those are going to be things that you and maybe your partner or your realtor need to have a conversation about so you feel super, super confident. When you go onto the market, you know exactly what's going to happen while you're showing, you know exactly what's going to happen once you're under contract, and then how you're going to actually make your move. I will say on that item too, sometimes people forget about the fact that they need to physically move large items like couches and otherwise. And not everybody has the ability to do that, which means hiring a moving company. So if you haven't already had conversations with moving companies, maybe in that 1 year prep timeline, you're getting budgets and ideas of what that looks like. Because while yes, you could probably charge it, if you're purchasing another house, you don't want to be charging anything to a credit card because you need your credit to stay intact when you move. And at the end of the day, if you have maybe friends or something else that you're able to move things out of your house physically, have that stuff lined up in advance instead of necessarily just spending a crazy amount on movers at the very, very last minute. So have that plan in advance. Okay, and then the very last one on my list, and maybe the most important one on the list, is figuring out who you are working with from a real estate professional perspective. So that means interviewing multiple realtors. There's a huge spread in how realtors do things. It's because people have been in the industry longer, or people have more experience in one area or another, or just different preferences. So have multiple people set up with interviews. I would highly recommend somebody who you found online, somebody who your friends recommend, and then maybe a discount brokerage, and compare the three and figure out what works best for you. There's been situations where I've worked with sellers that they chose the discount broker because it just made more sense for them. And there's been people that chose the stranger because it makes more sense for them. And so there's no right or wrong here, but the point is find somebody who you know is an expert, not the person that's done 2 sales this year, okay? Don't pick them. But somebody who you know is an expert in your area, can actually get the job done for you, and then it just feels like the best fit for you. There is no wrong answer. You just have to go through that process and interview, and I think then you'll find what makes the most sense for your family. If you have more questions logistic-wise, trying to figure out what your move looks like, or if you're in Washington State and you're in that 1 year period, get on my calendar. Let's have a conversation and see how we can make this move for you that much easier.